Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of How to Hack Time. Today is the big one, really. It's when I share with you the system, the planner that I use to structure my day. Each day, how do I get more done in less time? It's leveraging a thing called the 5 minute time manager that was put together by a friend of mine called Ashok Gupta. He created a time management course many years ago. His work these days is predominantly around helping people with chronic illness, fibromyalgia, long COVID, and so on. So I'll put a link to his work on in the description below. But it's quite a simple structure that you're going to see today. But it's like the longer I've gone on, the more I've realized sometimes the more simple the tool, the more effective it is often. But we often end up being given the simplicity and the simple tools after having gone through quite a period of heavy lifting, because that's the way sometimes personal development needs to work. So today I'm going to give you a simple structure for how you might plot your day out, and it's leveraging and giving you the ability to integrate and use and apply the three key lessons that I put into the first three videos that are in this series. So if you haven't watched those, do go and have a look at those. The three principles that we talked about in the first episode, it was very much about, look, ultimately, 20% of our time gives us 80% of the results. So it's critical that you clarify what you really want, what's really, really important, and then make damn sure that you're giving your best energy to that 20% of activity that you do in a day, so you can make sure that you also don't avoid the 20%, but through procrastination or distraction, and you get that 80% of the value that we typically can potentially miss out on if we don't nail that 20%, or if we don't even have clarity over what we're really trying to achieve in our lives and what would really juice us up. That's step number one. Step number two, we talked about Parkinson's law and giving ourselves boundaries around our time so that we fill up the amount of time we give ourselves for a particular task. And then in episode 3, we talked about rocks and gravel and how it's important to get those key items in a day that will give us the most value done when we can actually have our freshest energy. So we can go through those in a little bit more detail as I take you through it. Look, get ready. This isn't particularly high tech. This is the way that I would literally get a piece of paper out each day. And on one side, you can see I've got my nine, I'll start about 9 o'clock, 9, 10, 11, 12, an hour in each of those horizontal lines. And then there'll be a line in the middle, which will mean that on this side is the really important rocks. And I will have, so I have to do everything backwards here because of the video. I will also have a column which is actually for the gravel kind of tasks. This side is more for my rocks, right? So I will have something in here. It's really important. I get this email out. It's going to take me a bit of time. It's going to take me fresh energy. So I will do that task up early in the morning. I'll typically either do something also in the 9 o'clock, but I'll also use some of my first part of the day to just get some gravel out. Some of the gravel will be time boundaried. It'll be 20 minutes maybe to go through my email. But I will definitely make sure that I don't overextend and get sucked into a vortex of going. Remember, we talked about the dopamine hit of doing lots and lots of little tasks. Particularly, people like to do that, clear the decks in the morning, but actually you can end up using a lot of your fresh time. So you might have one or two things up in the 9 and 10 box, and you'll notice that this page does not have a lot on it. Now, sometimes I will populate it with more things, but one of the other things that's happening here is there are spaces for unexpected things, for things that I'm always setting myself up. One of the big principles is set yourself up for success. Sometimes people set themselves up for failure. There's a thing that Tony Robbins will talk about, which is people typically underestimate. Can I get this in the right way around now? We underestimate what, sorry, we overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we underestimate what we can do in the long term. So, for example, we will overestimate what we might be able to do in an hour. We'll underestimate what we can do in 2 weeks. The classic one that he talks about there is really in terms of like say a year and 10 years, but it can be applied to the smaller amounts as well. Sometimes I set myself up. I know, you remember one of the earlier videos I talked about, if I know it's going to take me even 5 to 10 minutes to do that particular task, but I know it's a challenging task and it's the kind of task that I would typically avoid for various different reasons of perfectionism. It's got a whole load of other things going on in terms of, those tasks that we have that we need to do, but they can be bound up in either, politics, or there's a kind of it's connected to a number of different things, and therefore it needs fresh thought. It might take me 5 minutes, but I know that many's the time I might avoid it because it's kind of like it's got a lot of charge to it. So I will set myself up that 5 minute task early on in the day because I know it's high risk of being avoided, and therefore I will get it done. And I'll give myself an hour to do it, knowing full well that I can either watch myself for half an hour not doing it, knowing I've still got that half hour to get it done in that hour boundary, or I will get it done in the first 5 to 10 minutes because I'm relaxed. My mind, which is always making these decisions about pain and pleasure, relaxes. It's like, oh, I've got an hour to do this. That's fine. It relaxes. And then typically when it's in a relaxed state and it's not prone to the fear, which then the brain goes into, I need some dopamine because I've got fear in my mind. I want to give you a lack of fear and a more pleasure. That's how we get sucked into going into our to-do list and doing something which is non-important but will give us a sense of doing something. And that's why the biggest thing around why people don't even like the word productivity, everybody thinks that they are being productive. Everybody thinks, okay, some people might have the humility to say, I could get more productive, but most people think they're doing their best. And they don't like the principle deep down. We're really honest with ourselves. Don't like this idea of, being more productive because they're already doing lots. There's a big thing, like Tim Ferriss, who obviously I've learned a lot from over the years. He's a maestro at all this stuff. He would have a real go at the use of the word busy. Most people in our culture say they're very busy. It's a badge of honor to be very busy. He would say busyness is a form of laziness because we're not spending the time understanding what are our frogs, which is the most important task of the day. What is our 20% that contributes to what we're really working on? And then the most important thing that I want to bring you in terms of all the work I can do with you is how do you get good at being able to do the things that sometimes we don't want to do, but we know is important? And so this, simple as it may look, is one of the greatest gifts I can give you because what you're doing is you're giving yourself time boundaries and you're working out how to play with this mind that on a conscious level is always trying to help us, but sometimes is a sabotaging influence or isn't actually very helpful. So you're setting yourself up for success. Lunchtime, block out an hour for lunch. Why not? Because you've done the heavy lifting of doing the things you don't want to do. You're allowed an hour lunch and it's not important, but you keep that clear. Number two, for me, at 2 o'clock, recording this video, it's important. So what we're doing here is we're finding times of the day when we can do our 20%. Yes, I know I might have a bit more fresh energy after lunch because I also know that if we talk about another hack, after lunch people can fall asleep a little bit because all the blood goes down to their belly. But I've learned from the glucose goddess, another little tip for you there. Do some physical movement after food. It avoids some of the blood going to the belly and just that close sleep. There's a load of stuff I could talk to you about that. It's a video from another day potentially, but don't eat loads of pasta first thing in your meal. Then you're going to get a sugar spike and you're going to get energies going up and down. For another day, we're talking in this structure about Parkinson's law. We're giving ourselves time boundaries. We're giving ourselves an hour. You might end up, I don't typically put more than one thing in an hour, to be honest, because I'm aware that there might be a multiple number of things that I might do in that hour, but they're represented by a particular single word or single phrase. It might be a bunch of research I want to do, and I'm going to spend an hour on that, and then I'm not going to do any more. There are times when certainly you can see here, there are quite often I'll give myself blank spaces because I know that chances are I'm going to unlock some flow state, and I'm probably going to drift into 2 hours on a particular task because I know I'm likely to go into flow state there. But if I don't, for whatever reason, so there's an unexpected thing comes up, then I'll do something else in that other hour later. I will sometimes populate this more heavily than this. I know what you're like. You will have a long to-do list and you'll be looking at me going, why have you obviously we've got a container, we've only got a certain amount of hours in a day. So this is great for saying, okay, there's only so many things on my to-do list that I can really get round to today. And obviously, one of the other things that's so magical about this is, and this is a really big lesson, what we're doing here is we're putting on a piece of paper things that we're going to do later on. What that then does for the mind is it says, don't worry about that thing. I'm going to do it at 2 o'clock. So you know how there are certain tasks which can be on our mind. Oh God, I've got to do that proposal, or oh God, I've got to have that call, or oh God, I've got to write that email. And it's going to be a challenging email because I want to say something which somebody's not going to receive very well. And I don't even know, like it's all complicated, or I'm going to have to talk to that client about something that went wrong. And they might, I need to prepare, I need to be fresh for that. And of course, all of those things are open. If we don't know what time of the day we're going to do something, it will be on our mind. It's the equivalent of when people have 10 to 50 tabs open on their computer. That sucks energy from your brain. If you don't think it does, think again. This is a similar thing. This is how we gain energy or lose energy in an average day. This is stuff that people don't know about. I teach about 3 levels of consciousness. I'll make future videos about this. I don't get too much into jargon, but this is the practical application of these things. Everybody's running on their conscious minds and they're unaware of their programming that's going on behind the scenes that drives behavior. That's the subconscious, and it's important. And then you also have like kind of a wider sense of your wider way of connection to the world, which I'll definitely talk about in future videos. But really, there is a whole thing about we can only do one thing at a time. I noticed my most recent video had the title Flow State Hacks, and that seemed to go down well with people because we know when we get into flow state, it's brilliant because we get more done in less time. But how do we get into flow state? Well, one of the things that this is so great for is it's saying 2 o'clock, I'm going to make my video. I might have like yesterday, I did one of my tasks was just do some prep for the video, just think it through. And I did that yesterday afternoon. And it was enough for me to then feel like, okay, tomorrow I'll do the video recording. I'll be fresh. I know what the 3 points are that I'm going to tackle today, and I'll record it when I'm in a flow state. So this gives you the ability to say, I'm going to do something later. So then you give yourself permission, your conscious mind, to not think about it at all. That also helps you create the conditions to get into flow state. What else can I tell you about this? I mean, yeah, you've got the two sides. So you're going to have the rocks on one side, you're going to have the gravel on the other side. I would typically do some gravel towards the end of my day, even towards the end of my morning. I've done my rocks. I've done my most important tasks. Later on in the day, you know what it's like. We start getting hungry. We've done our great stuff. We can go into email and have a whole period of time just flicking through email, getting a bunch of stuff. The stuff that needs to be done that takes time. It's important to also have a mechanism for flowing tasks through the day, getting things done that are prickly. Sometimes you know what it's like. Sometimes some things that might take 2 minutes, they're annoying. If we don't get round to doing them, if you have a good example of this, your to-do list, if you notice there are certain things that stay on your to-do list and you never get round to them. I remember a while back, someone was saying, look, if they've been on a to-do list for X number of time, like, 2 weeks, just delete it. You really need it on your to-do list. It gnaws away at the mind and drains your energy because what's happening is you're looking at things that you're not getting done and you've got no movement um in again, it's kind of like a flow. And if you've got things that are just on there saying you haven't done me, you haven't done me, you haven't done me, then that's going to irritate you at some level of your mind. If you can get into a point where you're obviously simplifying to-do lists, and again, this is all about getting clarity over what you're really trying to achieve, and then being able to get ruthless about what you don't even want on a to-do list. And then, like I say, there's a thing about the mind wanting to always feel productive and busy by doing lots of stuff. But really, the most important game in town is really getting clear and honest with yourself, radically honest with yourself about what things are important and what things just take up some time. The one of the worst things that ever happened for productivity a few years ago, many years ago now, was Slack was invented, and now we have all sorts of messaging apps and chat. Yes, they're important and they're useful and they do enable us. I know a lot of people don't understand how to manage email particularly well. They don't have a system in place, so they then prefer to go on to messaging apps. But what happens there is without a structure and a system to handle tasks, and then being at the mercy of the thing that we're drawn to about sometimes the messaging apps is there's an ability to just something comes in, it gets dealt with, and there's a movement. So there's this flowing tasks, and therefore there isn't this build up of an inbox that sometimes I think um, makes people feel drained because there's so many unopened messages. Um, but what happens with the messaging apps is that people get interrupted, and there can be a tendency to get drawn in because the mind likes dopamine hits to get interrupted when something, like for example, if you're on this, if you're doing your rock, you should not be allowing Slack or a messaging app to interrupt you because it's so easy to get distracted and diverted from something where you need to be in flow state. If you get that little bing in your inbox, the noise that tells you you've got a Slack message or a Teams message or whatever, you're gonna want to know who it is and is it important. It can wait for 50 more minutes. It can wait for half an hour. So, a lot of the time, if we're really honest with ourselves, we get sucked into doing things when we're in fresh state that could easily be done later. We get interrupted from our flow state. It takes a lot of time to get back into flow state after an interruption. So if you really want to nail this kind of topic that I'm talking about, number one, you want to get clear on what's really important. And then number two, you want to carve out your fresh energy and create the conditions to get those really important things done without fail. And that includes how do you deal with fear? How do you get things done when you don't want to get them done? And how do you avoid all the distractions that come up in average day? Now, I'm going to leave you with I've shared with you something which, it's valuable. And I know they often say, like, don't share things that are valuable for free because people don't value them then. My little deal with you on this basis, if you've watched this video this far, I know you're interested in this topic. Um, Go away, use this to your heart's content. Please do come back to me with thoughts about it. If you want to ask me, other ways of actually using it, I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you about that because I find this is just the best thing in town. But if you find after a couple of weeks, I would reckon that some of you out there are going to take something from what I've said today and you're going to apply it and you're going to use it. It might be only 5%, it might be 10% of what I've described. If that's achieved and it gets integrated into your daily flow, I think that's a result, isn't it? There'll be others of you who will be not taking anything on board, but you'll like hearing this and it will give you a slight lift. It'll make you feel like you've kind of learned something, but you won't act on any of it. That's just the harsh reality of how these things work. And there might be some of you, and it's unfortunately the reality of it is it's a very tiny proportion because this is the way the world works, where somebody will be aware, do you know what, Carl's onto something here, but give it 2 weeks, give it a month, and just observe you might think this is great and you'd love to use it, but then a month later, either you haven't used it or you're not really getting the value from it that you probably think you could. And you will identify there's something missing here. Is it that there'll be a bunch of things, and unfortunately, some of this happens in our subconscious, and it's our blind spot. So you might not even be aware of the programming in your subconscious that gets in the way, the internal saboteur. So my recommendation, my request of you is if you're one of those, to be honest, probably one in 100 watching this, who has enough awareness to know there's probably something that stops you within the best will in the world to apply these kind of things and really get committed and 100% engaged in using these kind of things, because there's much more where this kind of stuff comes from. You might get in touch with me and have a discussion just unpick what's going on with you on an average day in what you're facing around getting things that are really important done. There's more than likely other things that are going on that we can unpick and explore. So I'm always obviously very welcome to talk to you about all of that. And it would be very bespoke and very much about listening to you about what you find really irritating. There are solutions to any problem, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't necessarily go into the level of detail to unpick that. So that's what I'll leave you with. But for the bulk of you, if you take anything from this and you find it useful, that is also very much my intention to just share what I've learned over the years. And so I wish you well. And there will be more videos, obviously. So if you like this video, do please like it, subscribe to the channel, and you will get the future emails, future videos that I'll be making as they're produced roughly about once a week. All the best. Good luck. I'll see you on the other side. Take care. Bye.